So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I am Miranda Forsyth, and I am joining you all from Ngunnawal country, which is in Canberra, Australia. I am a director of the International Network against accusations of witchcraft and ritual attack. And we're a global coalition of researchers, advocates, survivors, and community leaders who are working to bring greater visibility and action to the rising tide of violence caused by accusations of witchcraft and ritual attacks, a form of harm that is all too often invisible in global human rights discourse. Across the world today, individuals, commonly women, elderly, persons with disabilities, and children, are being targeted, attacked, and even killed because of accusations rooted in fear, misfortune, and long-standing social tensions. While the specific practices vary, the pattern is disturbingly clear. The vulnerable are targeted, often through collective violence, and the harms they suffer are compounded by systemic impunity. Despite its devastating consequences, witchcraft accusations and related violence are rarely addressed in international human rights frameworks. And that's why today's conversation is so very important. We're very honoured to be joined by the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, Ms. Reem Alsalem, whose mandate has been critical in advancing global understanding of the many and evolving ways in which women and girls experience violence. Her insights are essential as we seek to work to expand the understanding of this urgent, complex, and often overlooked form of harm. This is going to be a question and answer style session, and I'm going to ask a series of questions and engage in conversation with the Special Rapporteur for about 30 to 40 minutes. We'll then open it up to the audience for questions and for comments. We're going to record the session and make it available on our website. So thank you all very much for joining us in this conversation. I'm going to start by, first of all, asking you a question in relation to the framing of the issue of accusations of witchcraft and ritual attack, partly as being gender-based violence. So as I just explained in the introduction, while a lot of the time women and girls are targeted, elderly women, in some parts of the world, it is mostly men who are the victims. And we are interested in knowing, can the issue be framed as one of violence against women and girls? And are there any issues, given the fact that in some places it is men and boys who are these victim classes?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the invitation to join you on this important discussion. As you rightly mentioned, I try as much as possible to also cast a light on underreported or underexplored issues of violence against women and girls. Now, obviously, with this particular issue, many survivors, my fellow colleague, the rapporteur on persons with albinism, and others have been speaking about this for many years. But it is also true that it's still not receiving the policy responses and the protection responses that the issue deserves. And I would add to that also my mandate in the sense that even though the mandate has joined others in writing about this to a number of governments. I've just actually checked, and I found that over the years we've sent only around 5 letters on this issue. So, and we can come to that later also why that is the case. But to answer your question, I would say it's very clear from what we know that it is very gendered in the sense that men are almost are the principal group of accusers, and women constitute usually the group that is accused. And it is violence against women because it is very gendered, and because it is also used in order to perpetrate and justify violence against women, against particular groups of women, and to have them also subjugated to serious violations of their human rights that include even femicide, death, physical attacks, torture, inhuman and degrading treatment. And we see that women that are older women, women in poverty, women with disabilities, women, that belong to communities with albinism, etc., can be even more exposed to this kind of harm.
Thank you. So just picking up then on one of the things that you said in terms of the gaps in international response.
Yeah.
So there's still limited mention of witchcraft accusations in key UN human rights instruments and processes. Which ones do you think the issue should best be addressed through? And what do you think are some of the barriers to elevating this issue within the UN mechanisms?
So, as you rightly mentioned, I'm not aware of any international convention that directly addresses witchcraft motivated violence. But of course, by it being violence against human beings and violence against women, there are many existing conventions, I would say, that are relevant. So you have definitely the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. You have the Declaration Ending Violence Against Women. You have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. You have the Convention on Against Torture. And then for women that flee persecution related to witchcraft, I would say the Refugee Convention, other regional conventions that govern the provision or extending protection to persons fleeing persecutions would also apply.
And what would you say if we, as a group of advocates and networks, wanted to engage further with all of those different conventions? What would be the pathways that we could adopt in order to do that?
So it requires a holistic approach, which is, again, it's not, the main crux of my work, but my understanding is that you are doing quite a lot of the things that require more visibility and more advocacy. So I understand that with regards to, for example, special procedures, again, the special procedures, the special rapporteur on persons with albinism has alluded to that in her reports over the years. But I would also say that there is a need to highlight more in the plight and experience of individual and group survivors and victims, to keep the pressure on governments to continue to write to them about this issue. It has to be featured in the Universal Periodic Review of countries that are affected, and where this practice continues, and where also violence inflicted on persons associated with witchcraft continues. And also treaty bodies reviews. So when the review of the performance of countries where this is an issue comes up, it needs to be highlighted and it needs to be put front and center.
Thank you. Those are a really great range of suggestions. So I'm sure that we'll be trying to to do some of them at least in the next little while. Um, just in
Sorry,
terms,
there was another one that and again, I don't know to what extent this is done, but also if there are emblematic cases where victims can be represented in courts in order to build also case law, I would also recommend that.
what do you mean by an emblematic case?
So if there's, for example, the situation of a victim, and that person could be also outside her country of origin. So if she has fled to a country of asylum and has been denied protection because the issue has not been sufficiently understood and featured into her asylum claim, and therefore not been part of the of a proper decision on her request for asylum or international protection. Then also to make sure that the appeals receive support, that this person has legal aid, and that it can maybe be elevated either at the highest court in that country, or even, why not, if necessary, any of the regional courts that would be looking into this situation. I also know that many of the regional treaty bodies of the regional treaties have monitoring mechanisms, including regional treaties that deal with non-discrimination and violence against women. So the African, for example, Commission on Human and People's Rights, you have Belém do Pará, you have a number of, you have the Istanbul Convention. So also how to feed these mechanisms that monitor the implementation of these treaties with relevant information in order to bring visibility to this issue.
Mhm. Thank you. So turning to the role of your office, there is evidence that witchcraft accusations and other forms of violence against women and girls can occur at the same time. So, for example, if a girl dies following FGM, sometimes
Yes,
then she's labeled as a witch in order to explain her demise. And
yes.
so we're wondering whether or not the mandate of your office could expand to explicitly address witchcraft accusation related violence and ritual attacks. And I suppose what are some of the challenges that you would see in doing that?
So I think that it already has a scope to look at such cases as you mentioned. There's no need to formally expand the scope of the mandate, because the mandate engages on behalf of all women and girls that experience violence, and it very much takes an intersectional approach to its work, which also implies a recognition that in different circumstances, in different situations, there are certain groups of women and girls that may be more exposed to violence because of certain aspects, either in their identities or their backgrounds, whether it's racial or ethnic or related to age or their economic status, etc. And I think, therefore, the women that get accused of being engaged of witchcraft, or that are sought out also as part of sort of certain body parts that could be used as ingredients in witchcraft, fall into those categories. Now, for witchcraft accusations, what we know is that it does serve also a scapegoating function. So the scapegoating relies on stigmatizing these women. It also fulfills the function of othering. And they are usually, the victims are women that are particularly vulnerable, or they could be standing out, they could be considered by men in their communities or that community as being, non-conforming, as being rebellious. They might also have specific features, that are considered from the point of view of the community problematic, or that make them stand out. And in a number of situations also, the witchcraft accusations can serve as a way to control these women, or to exploit these women, or to also take away from them anything of value that they may hold. So we know that in a number of countries, for example, if a woman inherits from her deceased husband, somebody in her husband's family might then accuse her wrongfully of engaging in witchcraft, so that they can then take away the land or whatever property it is away from her. So And that's why I would say it does happen frequently that the men who then make these accusations or who insist on prosecuting these women are actually known to these women and may even be related to them. So that of course happens also to many women in other contexts. So the witchcraft accusations become a tool of persecution, become a gender tool of inflicting violence and discriminating against women and marginalizing them further and exploiting them. So it's in that sense, it's really the same modus operandi that other women victims of violence experience.
Mm. Thank you. That's such a great complete answer, and it's fantastic to hear that your office is really seized of those issues. Certainly, where I work in PNG, many of those circumstances you identified very much ring true. So turning to the topic of justice and redress. Victims of witchcraft accusations often really struggle to access justice. Often, they find that police are complicit. It's very
Yes.
hard to get to courts. What strategies would you say can be used to push for legal accountability in countries, particularly where these issues tend to be addressed because they might be culturally sensitive or politically ignored?
So, and I'm sure there are many experts, including those who are listening to us today, who, as I say, work more on this issue than I do. But I just wanted to backtrack a little bit and say that even when it comes to access to justice for victims and the widespread impunity and inability of victims to see redress, we see similarities also between victims of witchcraft accusations or witchcraft-related violence and and women that are victims of other sort of crimes, in the sense that even prosecution patterns can, reflect also these gender dynamics. They can reflect the imbalances of power. And we see then that the men who perpetrate this violence will either get reduced sentences or will get away with it. That the woman, the victim, might not get believed, that she's seen not to have sufficient proofs to prove this issue, and of course, part of that also relates to the nature of the issue at hand, because in many societies you have things that range between, witchcraft beliefs being central to the beliefs of a society with all the problems that this brings, to societies and individuals and law enforcement that believe this is all nonsense, basically, and it's just has really no impact on the experiences of any individuals. So you have everything also in between. Now, there are states, of course, that try to basically crack down on witchcraft-related persecutions through legislation, so by criminalizing it. But as we know also from other cases of violence against women, criminalizing on its own is not sufficient, has never been, especially if also you don't put sufficient resources, you don't do the necessary awareness raising, training for law enforcement, for the judiciary on how to deal with this issue. And also, you have to also adopt other measures, right? One of them is to provide adequate protection for then the women, the victims that may have survived miraculously these acts of persecution or that have reported. And in a sad way, in a number of countries, sometimes being in prison is the safest place for her to be, because otherwise she might get lynched or killed either by the community or by others. But then also you need to also work on changing sort of norms, bringing about the change amongst communities. You have to involve traditional and customary leaders who also play a very important role to offset this related violence. And then you have to also have proper mechanisms in place at community level in order to protect and support the women that are accused, to combat the misconceptions that have contributed to this violence in the first place. So, as we know, nothing new under the sun. One measure of intervention on its own, especially legal or justice related, will never bring about the desired change. It has to be really an all society approach, and it has to work at all levels.
Could you give us any examples of where, like thinking about a different form of violence against women, where that holistic approach that you've just outlined has been implemented and has had some success?
Has had some success. This is, I think, the eternal challenge, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't say that violence against women continues to happen at epidemic levels.
Mm,
Because while we have the recipe and we know what needs to be done, I would say we're still very far from getting where we need to be. Um, so I'm just trying to think, because I think lately one of the challenges we have is actually in delivering justice. I think there's more and more a failure in delivering justice to victims. Um, but it's linked, frankly, to the fact that if you will not be able to get justice for the victims or address the issue if perpetrators continue to enjoy impunity, and they will continue to enjoy impunity if there is a failure to deliver justice, but also underreporting, and victims will not come forward if they don't trust
mm,
the justice system, if they are not provided with safe spaces to seek shelter in pending the situation, if they are not believed and there is a giant gender bias in courts, if they continue to experience threats. So it's all linked to each other.
mm,
It's
mm,
all part of a bigger puzzle.
mhm,
Unfortunately, right now I can't remember off the top of my head really um, a compelling example where things have worked or where we have done what needs to be done.
mhm. Thank you. So what I'm hearing you saying is that we need to be thinking about the fact that this is a systems problem, and there are many
Yes.
different points that we can intervene in order to try to make positive feedback loops occurring rather than the somewhat sort of negative cycles of violence that we see in so many parts of the world.
Yes.
Um, so in terms of prevention and education then, because often we find where there is attention being paid to this issue, often it is very reactive rather than being preventative, even though we know that there needs to be an emphasis on prevention. Um, can you think of any global practices that exist for challenging harmful beliefs that, particularly those that are seeking to shift religious leaders and cultural leaders who might have messaging that goes that in some way supports the narratives about witchcraft and its existence?
On witchcraft specifically, no, I cannot, as I said, I don't have sufficient expertise on this, but I know that there's just one example, although that doesn't involve traditional leaders per se, but I know that actually from colleagues in UNODC that some asylum authorities in some Western countries have realized that many of the victims, let's say, of prostitution or trafficking for sexual exploitation continue to be terrorized by this fear they have of uh, persons who have used witchcraft to basically trap them in this situation of exploitation. And the way that translates is that even if they are now in another country, they firmly believe that by disclosing the names of their traffickers or those who sold them or the criminal networks, they or their family members will be harmed because there is this black magic done on them, and that because of this black magic, they will be hunted down, or those responsible will know, and they will also harm their families. And so there has been, I think, some recognition that one has to undo this, the grip that this witchcraft has on the lives of victims. And I understand that in some countries they've brought in people from those communities who have then done some rituals in order to undo or give that impression to the victim that this magic has been undone, so that they can feel more relaxed, more safe, and can therefore also cooperate not just with the authorities in the country where they are, but also for their own sake. So it's not just to report on the criminal gangs, but also to be able to really share what has happened to them, and be able to hopefully get the attention that they need. But that requires a change, also a cultural shift in the minds of asylum authorities. And it's an example of working in a victim-centered manner, right? Because you base yourself on what matters for the victim, and the victim's worldview, and the victim's beliefs, and try to also use that in order to help the victim help herself.
Um, Thank you. That's I'm sure that there's going to be some questions from the audience about that topic, because certainly in the area of witchcraft accusations in particular parts of the world, there is a big role that's played by pastors who can really foment these accusations in very problematic ways.
Yeah.
But the last question that I wanted to ask you about is in terms of a call to action. So what would you like to see from states at the next Human Rights Council session in terms of action on accusations of witchcraft and ritual attacks?
So look, my next report to the Council is on emerging and underexplored issues in sex-based violence. Initially, I had wanted to also say something about this. The problem is that our reports are limited. We have 10,700 words. They're even become reduced because of the funding crisis of the UN. So all to say that I unfortunately have not been able to include this issue in the list of issues I did want to include. That said, I believe that still a lot can be done, even outside a regular council sessions, by building the body of cases that special procedures raise, by giving visibility through events like this, but also perhaps more side events at council sessions, by exploring opportunities for strategic litigation, if we think that this can be done, by raising more and more awareness, also amongst those working in the human rights field, also working with humanitarian partners, service providers that are the first to come in contact with women affected by violence and communities affected by violence, so that they can be sensitive to recognizing this issue, activating pathways for protection and assistance for victims. Because from my experience also in other situations, some of the first line responders may feel very uneasy about dealing with these situations if they lack the knowledge, if they lack the expertise, and if there are no clear, let's say, standard operating procedures that they can activate. And so they become too scared to deal with these situations and prefer, therefore, to either not do anything or refer them to others. And so there's a lot that can be done tailored to each situation on the ground in order to make first-hand responders and first-line service providers and humanitarian actors and even, you know, religious figures more comfortable with how to deal with victims of such violence. And yeah, and to continue to spotlight the issue. I firmly believe it's not sufficiently spoken about, and that we need to, of course, also engage academics and researchers like yourselves and others who are doing the work of analyzing the data, speaking to communities and victims, and bringing more awareness to this very complex issue that needs to be understood in its nuanced, with its nuances. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Hopefully, maybe if you can't bring it up in this report, maybe the next report you'll be able to squeeze it in.
Yeah,
Um,
next year I haven't decided on my reports yet, but my next report at the GA is on surrogacy. So if there's any link to that and it hasn't been made, then I'm not sure it will feature there. But
okay. Well, maybe I'll open it up now to our audience to see if anybody has got any questions that they would like to ask the Special Rapporteur. You can raise your hand or put your question in the chat. We've got Louise, and maybe just if you introduce yourselves as well before you ask your question.
I had to do the actual sort of analog, the old-fashioned way of raising a hand because I couldn't find it electronic. So thank you. My name is Eloise Meinke, and I've been a part of the INAWARA group for. Can you hear me? Okay.
Not really very well.
No, you have an echo.
I have an echo.
No, but also you sound very far, so it's it's not very clear.
Oh, I will just try to find out.
Okay, has anybody else got a question that they would like to ask in the meantime?
Okay, my name is Govind Kelkar and from India, Delhi. I wanted to ask you, ma'am, one thing, that is, what can we learn from European experience? Because we have looked at Asia. I also work on witch hunts, and we have an organization. And thank you so much for kind of giving a very enlightening talk and how it is really linked with other questions. But I find European societies, and also to some extent, and to a large extent, not some extent, New England and other experiences, where the witch hunt has been eradicated. And this is one thing that I thought would be useful to learn a kind of, and also question European exceptionalism, that this is not really, this was there very much part of history, and how it was eliminated. Thank you. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, thank you for that question. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about the good practices and experiences in eradicating. My knowledge is limited to actually the challenges that, in particular, asylum authorities have in fully recognizing the scale of witchcraft-related persecutions and also properly factoring it in. And we know this because there have been studies, you know, on asylum decisions by different Western countries, which show that there is actually a very clear gap and challenge still in authorities recognizing the harm sufficiently seriously or also factoring it into the decision. So, but I'm sure other experts might know more about good practices, and I would actually be very interested in that as well.
Well, we've got Charlotte Meredith here who might have some thoughts to contribute afterwards, but maybe we'll turn to Lethan first of all.
Okay, could you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great, fantastic. Thanks a lot for answering those questions, really informative. But just moving away from it, and I'm very much interested in leadership and leadership qualities, because when we think about witchcraft accusation, most of us probably on this call, we've been working on it for a number of years. But when we think, for example, around um, forced marriage or female genital mutilation or cutting.
Yes.
Activists and academics would have been working on it on much a longer period of time compared to witchcraft accusations. So, and I'm also interested in you as an individual and as a leader, what are the type of qualities that you had to develop as a leader in order to maneuver this landscape where you face a lot of barriers and challenges and probably a lot of misogyny as well, and attacks on yourself. So what are the qualities that you think that we as leaders in this space should develop or we should have and to face the challenges ahead?
Thank you for your question. Look, I mean, as a woman and as a woman from the global south, I think I belong to the group of, I mean, to women who are visible in public life and who have prominent roles and responsibilities, and therefore who get also attacked and experience harassment, attacks, vilification because of the views that I hold on some issues or because of the work I do. And in that case, I'm not saying that I'm a special case or I'm that, in a class of my own. I think I represent what millions of women go through, whether it's politicians, whether it's women in sports, whether it's human rights defenders. We experience violence in very gendered ways, again, because we are women and because of other perhaps attributes that we have. So it's difficult, frankly, it's difficult to work in human rights these days. It's difficult to also assert one's own views and beliefs and write to say them. And it's more difficult even when you are a woman. On issues like witchcraft and that have to do also with violence against women and girls, I would say that we all have to guard against unconscious biases. And by that, I mean particular biases against the religious or cultural views of countries or communities, because in these biases, we may actually miss, as I said, what really matters and how certain cultural aspects influence the experience of discrimination and violence. So if we stereotype communities and we stereotype the victims, we may actually simplify the experience and therefore ignore specific and important elements pertaining to them. I'll give an example just because it's coming to my mind right now, even though it doesn't have to do with witchcraft. So, for example, let's say the UK, where I did a visit last year. So in the public narrative, there's this misconceived belief that the majority of victims of gang rapes have been white girls, and that the perpetrators are mainly Muslim men. And without going into a discussion of whether, what the data says on that or not, it struck me that those that put out this misinformation fail, therefore, to also recognize and understand how Muslim girls living in the UK experience violence. and assume that they are shielded from violence or discrimination inside their own communities, or simply because they belong to the same faith. So they would, for example, fail to mention or ignore cases of, let's say, adolescent girls who may have shared private images with, intimate partners, and then these partners then turn around and use these images to threaten them, to exploit them further sexually, to buy off their silence, to terrorize them, that if they distribute, if this relationship is known, or if they share this information, they may also subjugate these girls either to honor killings or violence in their communities. So by adopting a certain cultural view, you also completely marginalize the experience of members that belong to a certain community, because you've decided to demonize a community, and you are relying on stereotypes that, have many elements that are untrue. And you have decided to adopt a very simplistic approach to an issue, and thereby also fail to recognize the nuances. I don't know if that example makes sense, but that's just one thing that struck me recently.
Thank you so much. And in fact, you're absolutely right. The area that we work in is an area where there are so many misunderstandings and misconceptions and assumptions that people make about the role of culture, the role of religion. So that is it's a very important point. Going back to you, Louise.
I'm not sure. Is this better?
Yes.
Yes.
Ah, hallelujah. Thank you for your patience. I'm Anne-Louise Meinke. I've been part of the INAWARA working group for, well, quite some time now. I have two questions. The first one is, we've been talking a lot about, you were giving examples of all the various ways that we could engage in the system to put this issue on the agenda.
Mm.
We are obviously not a very resource-rich network. A lot of us are actually doing this work without getting paid for it, in our spare time or on the side of something else. We have been obviously looking to get more funding for various things which are very sort of project-orientated or very specific to an initial thing. Now, out of all the things that you mentioned that we could or should be doing, and especially when we're looking at, we have to have a holistic approach, we also have to decide what is most important and what would have most impact. So from your perspective, would you be able to list perhaps the top 3 things that we should be doing in the next 6 to 12 months? So that would be my first question, and maybe I'll just leave it to answer that one first.
So from from my own perspective, and given the lack of resources that you said, which is a common challenge for many, I would say is to liaise between, if you can, like bring advise victims on how they can reach us. So I'm assuming that most people on this call know how special procedures work. You know that we can engage on behalf of victims and groups of victims, that we have a certain way of working, that when we engage with states or non-state actors on behalf of victims, we don't disclose the source of the complaint. The victims will have to decide for themselves if they want to remain anonymous in the letter that we write, so that we write to the government, for example, about a certain problem, in general ways, or they want us to raise their own specific situations. But that's something I think anyone can do, is to, if you recognize let's say, specific cases or situations through your research that you think would require or would benefit from an intervention by special procedures, then to put them in touch with us and we can take it from there. I want to say that, I mean, I have, through my engagement with victims, realized sometimes the scale of a problem without prior knowledge. For example, working with mothers that have been victims of family courts, particularly in custody cases. That is not something that was on my radar screen, but only through contact with the victims and recognizing the trends in their experiencing and recognizing the failures of court systems across the world with regards to mothers, did I, realize that this is an issue that required the intervention of the mandate, and it became then the subject of a thematic report, and it became also the subject of a lot of engagement. I'm saying this as an example to say that we need to build the body of evidence. We need to help victims put this on the radar screen of human rights mechanisms, governments, courts. And that's, I think, something everybody can do based on their, limited resources.
Thank you. Maybe we'll go to Linda, and then if we've got time, we'll come back for your second question, Louise.
Thank you. Hi, Reem. Sadly, I got in Canada. I got the time mixed up, and I missed your talk. So I'm just going by the seat of my pants. I'm really sorry. I'll have to watch the video later. But what I wanted to ask is, I'm Linda McDonald from Canada and work with Jean Sarson on non-state torture. And we have had women from Papua New Guinea contact us who were working with women in witch burnings, recognize that non-state torture is indeed part of witch burning. And I don't know if you mentioned that in your talk, but that's how we bring it in our work, is that witch burning is a form of non-state torture.
Yeah.
Just wanted to know if you would comment on that.
Yes, I did mention, Linda, and it's good to see you, by the way, again. I did mention that it constitutes a grave violation of human rights and could rise to being also torture, inhumane and degrading treatment, and can also lead to femicide. And that reminds me also your question of the need to say that another way to contribute is to also enrich the analysis, of the violations and link them to human rights. I think especially with regards to issues of violence against women and girls, we can still do so much more in using the plethora of human rights instruments and concepts and tools to understanding the violations at hand. And this is what I am trying to do through, for example, this upcoming report, is to talk about manifestations of violence that haven't deserved sufficient attention and haven't been understood in their full in their full potential. And this is what I try to do with all my reports, including the one on prostitution, is to how to unpack the issues and understand the entire human rights consequences.
Thank you, because it's been very affirming for the women in Papua New Guinea, to be recognized as survivors of non-state torture.
Yes.
Thank you.
And on that note, we'll go to one of the champions of victims of what's called sorcery accusation-related violence in Papua New Guinea, Shirley. Shirley, take yourself off mute.
Thank you, Miranda, and thank you, Reem. I take note of all the critical information that was shared. That's just maybe a few points from me. My name is Shirley, and I work for Magna Carta PNG. We are a community-based human rights organization. We also run a safe house. And also joining me tonight was our colleague Tara from Doctors Without Borders. They're working on SARV as well in the Highlands. And our pro bono lawyer, counsel Rosemary Koimo, is joining us as well. Yeah. So the sorcery accusation related violence practice in Papua New Guinea, I think it's totally different from the other parts of the world. I think for us, it's like really, really heinous and brutal. And, you know, sometimes when we talk about it, we feel like, you know, we don't want to talk about it. Or we're just like, it's just affecting the whole, you know, mental health and every aspects of our humanity.
Yeah.
And one of the things is lacking, and we're still trying to push for, it's access to justice. We have very strong criminal law. We also amended our law to respond to SARV in terms of access to justice, but it's just the enforcement part. And one of the strongest, very strong, compelling challenge for us is it's the whole community of men in a particular village or community attacking some vulnerable women.
Yes.
And when the police intervene, it's very hard to bring all of them to, you know, to the police station, or bring all of them to arrest and all this. And it's just one thing. Over the time, we were calling for mass arrest, mass charge, but we can't be even getting there. So my question, I'm not sure in other parts of the world, like, do they ever do like a mass arrest on people that are attacking innocent women and children in a community? Is there a way that they do mass arrest and charge and all of them go to court? Why don't we understand this kind of, you know, the law enforcement system or criminal justice system, that we can come back and advocate more how they can bring all these people, you know, through the criminal justice system? Yeah, that's one. And two, you know,
maybe we'll just
it's
leave
very hard
just
for
one
people to
question,
come.
Shirley, because we're going to run out of time as well.
All right, thank you, Miranda. I'm done. Thank you.
Shirley, thank you for joining us today. And in fact, I know there's a myriad of issues of grave concern in Papua New Guinea for women, different groups of women. I actually had a question also for you and everybody else, which is with regards to, you know, UN agencies that have programs for prevention and response to violence against women, donors that support also women victims of violence. To what extent are they sensitized to the need for action and for support, and to what extent are they also willing to engage on this issue? Because if they're not, then that we have our work cut out for us. I know, for example, UN Women has the this program, you know, this global program for funding actors that work on violence against women. To what extent do they fund those engaging on prevention of witchcraft-related violence? And is there something we can do more to convince them to support more? But with regards to good practices, to me, also dealing with witchcraft accusations is very, and I don't know if you would agree, but is an issue that needs to be treated the way we treat other complex faith and culture-based forms of violence. And that means that we can't have quick fixes. It means also that the justice route on its own, you know, will not bring the results we need. It means working with religious and traditional leaders. But for example, FGM, you know, in countries where a lot has been achieved in terms of eradicating FGM, which was also justified in many contexts based on religious or cultural factors. How did they manage to do that? And I think maybe there are lessons that can be learned also for dealing with witchcraft-related accusations based on that. I don't know if you all would agree with that, but it's kind of what I sense.
Well, thank you. We've got time for one more question. So Jean, or actually maybe two. So because there was one question in the chat, so maybe I'll ask that and then we'll turn to Jean, and if you answer both of them, Special Rapporteur. So Anurita from Northeast Network says, good evening from Assam, India. What role does the Special Rapporteur play with regard to witch hunting in vulnerable situations such as conflict-affected areas? So that's one question for you. And then, Jean, if you've got your question.
Do you want to take the first question first? Because I know I'm lost.
Can you repeat the question,
Okay,
Miranda?
so the question is, what role can be played in regards to witch hunting in situations such as conflict-affected areas? So I suppose where there's particular difficulties affecting everything, the reporting and access to justice and to other kinds of support situations.
I think the same as in a non-conflict related context, only that the challenges are going to be more acute because of the insecurity, because of the could be lawlessness, the proliferation of groups and actors, and therefore their impunity. So there will be a lot more challenges, I think, in doing what needs to be done, but it's the same kind of action.
Okay, and Jean?
Thank you, Reem. I'm like Linda. I had 8 o'clock to start here in Nova Scotia, but my question was the importance of creating a victim-centered approach in hearing clearly what the victim is enduring, how they present the crime and their suffering. How important do you think that is?
Super important.
Yeah.
And I can't believe that after all these decades of talking about it and everybody recognizes it, we still don't seem to get it right, huh? It's just mind-blowing. And it shows you that really it's not an issue of lack of knowledge or not knowing what the recommendations are. It's a political commitment. It's one that requires resources. It requires it requires prioritization, and the world is still not cut that way. Yeah.
Okay, well, on a rather sort of a disappointing note.
No, sorry, Miranda, but we cannot give up. We cannot
Yes.
give up, and we must continue, therefore, to hold decision makers accountable, and also to amplify the voices of the victims and make sure that we continue to, exert and demand that they rise up to their that states and non-state actors fulfill their obligations. So it's not good enough to say that we're just not doing it, that they're not doing it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you so much for all of your suggestions and for the encouragement that you've provided. Thank you for the work that you do, both on this issue and on, all of the myriad of issues that that you highlight that affect women and girls. So we will have this up on the website. Really encourage everybody who's been part of this discussion to stay involved. And together, let's keep making some progress. So thank you. If everyone could just clap to thank
Thank you.
the Special
Thank you to
Rapporteur.
you.
Okay.